This video is about the review of inputs and assumptions in a project finance model. So this is the last episode in the series on review of a project finance model. And in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about how to review the inputs and assumption that goes into the model. But before I go into the review of project finance models, I want to just maybe open a parenthesis and tell you about the mentality that you need to adopt as a financial modeler when you're working on a deal. So I always say the difference between a lawyer and a financial modeler when it comes to a project finance deal is that the lawyers, they always defend the point of view of their clients, right? So they look at the contract, they look at the project from the point of view of their client. So if the lawyer is working for the sponsor and you have a lawyer working for the lender, and the interaction is just to get, the point of view of the other party across. However, when it comes to the financial modeler needs to take the point of view of everyone into consideration and come up with a scenario that works for everyone. It should be win-win for everybody. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And that's why, as a financial modeler, you need to really understand the point of view of not only your team, not only your client, but also the other parties involved, actually all the parties involved, okay? So that's an interesting and important point to consider when you're reviewing someone else's financial model, is to first understand, okay, so what was the point of view of the person who sent me the model? What was their really view on the future? Because basically a financial model is just the forecast of the future. So what was their point of view on the future? Did they have a optimistic point of view or pessimistic point of view? So all these are the things that you need to understand when you are reviewing a financial model and when you are also defining your own base case or a base case for your client. So just to give you an idea, the two main stakeholders in a project finance deal are sponsors, developers, and lenders, right? There are other party, EPC, O&M, and government if it's a concession. So there are many parties involved. However, the two main stakeholders are the sponsors and the lenders. In terms of the point of view of these two stakeholders, sponsors and developers are known to be risk takers and are known to be very intuitive people. And I found this very interesting. Working with sponsors and working for sponsors made me understand, about the mentality of these people. I mean, very interesting to see how intuitive they are. So most of the time, uh, it's a very difficult to balance that because you are coming as a financial modeler with facts, figures, and quantitative scenarios and analysis. And on the other hand, you have someone who is very intuitive, who is very passionate about their project, is a go-getter. Okay. So you need to really balance these two, understand their point of view, and also give them, the solution based on their point of view, and understand also their intuition, that sometimes you need to take their intuition very seriously, okay? Because most of the time, their intuition is telling them the right thing to do. But you need to test it in the model. So that's your role, to take their intuition and then test it in the model and also give them additional scenarios. So that's how you can help these sponsors. And when you're reviewing the financial model from the point of view of sponsors, you need to consider that these people, they have more appetite for risk, okay, compared to lenders. Lenders are, as I said, risk averse, non-risk averse as compared to sponsors, and they are majority shareholders. So they have more negotiation power when it comes to defining the base case. For example, the debt sizing, and of course, it's their product. So when you're sizing your debt, when you're sculpting the debt, this is all done from the point of view of the lenders. Okay, so the lenders will tell you, will tell the sponsors, they will tell them how they see the world. And based on how they see the world, they're going to structure the deal based on that. Okay. And even though the sponsors might not agree with some of the things that the lenders will come up, they need to just take it into consideration in the base case and do the analysis based on the point of view of lenders. Just to give you an example, in a deal, for example, these are mainly the typical things that differentiate between the sponsor and lender. For example, one of the common things is construction contingency. You know that in all deals, when we are putting together the construction budget, we put a contingency level for unexpected costs that we couldn't estimate in the feasibility stage. We put, for example, depending on technology, project, we put 5 to 10 to 20% of total project cost as contingency. This can be 5% of capex only, or it can be capex plus financing cost. So it differs. So when the sponsors, they send the model to lenders, maybe they will put 3%, 5% contingency in the budget, and they send it to the lenders. Lenders, together with their technical advisors, they're going to review, and they might come up with a higher contingency. Okay, so sponsors, although they think that no, they are confident that we're going to finish the project on time and on budget, and most probably we will have only 5% additional cost. However, lenders are more conservative. They say, okay, no matter what you think, based on our experience, we would rather have 10% contingency included in the budget. So sponsors, they take that 10%, they put it in their model, they do all their calculation, and when they want to look at the scenario from their point of view, they would test. So what happens if we do not spend all the 10% contingency and we only spend 5%? And depending on the way that the contracts are drafted, they will see how they can manage that unspent contingency. The other common difference between the lenders and the sponsors scenario is the level of production. For example, a renewable project, you know that it's all based on statistic, right? Solar, wind, hydro. You look at the probability distribution of irradiation of the sun shining and the wind blowing, and then you say, okay, based on my historical data and based on what I collected from the project site, I know that on average, this amount of kilowatt hour per year can be extracted if with a 50% certainty. That's called P50. So P50 with 50% certainty is what the sponsors will consider in their base case. However, lenders will say 50% is not enough for me. I want to have 90% confidence in this level of production that you are giving me. So they're going to pick up that 90% certainty. And you know that there's a trade-off between certainty and, you know, the level. So when you have more certainty, the level of production will be less, right? So P90 will be less than P50 in terms of production. So that's something that is also considered as a difference between lenders and sponsors in most cases. And there are also some other things, maybe working capital days, and there are also some other differences. So when you are reviewing a financial model, you need to understand what was the point of view of the institution, organization, of the company who sent you the model, and define the base case, your base case based on the point of view of your organization, of your company, okay? And then try to reconcile the two, okay? Consider both of them and reconcile the two. So that's an important point when you're reviewing a financial model, to understand from which point of view you are looking at things, and understand the other party's point of view as well. In terms of review of assumptions, one thing is another housekeeping hint. One thing that I started applying actually many years ago is to include a simple worksheet in my financial models that I called resources. And this worksheet contains all the assumption that goes into the model. It's basically a copy and paste of the inputs, financial model inputs. So for each input that goes into the model, when I'm reviewing a model, I want to understand where they got that assumption from and whether it makes sense to me and to the company or to the client that I am reviewing the model for. Okay, so for each and every assumption that goes into the model, I'm going to go and look for the justification. Okay, so sometimes I can find the justification in one of the project documents. That's why I told you it's very important for a financial modeler to have access to all the project document, to be involved in all the discussions, so that you can review these inputs and find the justification for it. Okay, so you can understand that if you do not have access to the project document, or if you don't go and read the project documents and talk to people, the question and the issue list that you're going to send on the model is going to be very lengthy, right? Because most of these assumptions, maybe you will not have the justification for it. So you want to understand why they assume 12 months construction, for example, or why did they assume this number of days for the working capital. So all these assumptions, you want to understand them. And if you want to ask the question for each and every input that goes into the model, then you will have a very lengthy discussion on the inputs. So in order to avoid that, you're going to spend, that's why in my first video, I said that I spend maybe 20% of my time when I do a review of a financial model on the mechanical check, and 80% of my time is on the review of inputs and calculations. And this is because I need to really go and read all the project documents, read all the contracts to understand where they got the inputs from. And having this worksheet within the model that trace back the resources, references, the input references, is helping me to kind of have a structure. So I'm going to go and put down in a column next to each input where first of all, when I'm building a model, I will always include that in my models. And when I'm reviewing someone else's model, if it doesn't have this sheet, I'm going to include it and go and look for where they got the input from. And I'm going to put the reference next to it. And I'm going to put a comment as well. For example, if they have 12 months construction, and it was just an assumption that I saw that in their project info memo, they mentioned that based on the previous experience, we have assumed 12 months construction period. But since I maybe had experience previously working on a similar project, or maybe I did some benchmarking, I read some technical documents, and I understood that maybe for the project of that scale, 12 months might be a little bit optimistic, and maybe we want to consider 18 months, okay? So I'm going to question, as I said in my video on how to ask better questions, I'm not going to accuse, I'm not going to basically put my opinion up front. I'm just going to ask the why question. Why did you assume 12 months? because every project is unique. Okay, so there might be some specification that I am not aware of, you see. So for example, it happens a lot. People, when they review, for example, hydro project, they review a hydro project and they say the project uh, cost is too high because they do a per unit cost comparison with other maybe projects that they had in their portfolio, and they say that this project seems to be high. The cost seems to be higher compared to other projects that we have seen and we have in our portfolio. And why is that? And that's a very good question to ask. And then they will maybe come up and tell you why, because maybe the project is in a very remote area, or maybe the project that you have considered as benchmarking, they were maybe run of the river, and the one that is now considered and you are reviewing is maybe with the dam, which is much more expensive. So you need to always ask the why question when it comes to inputs. And of course, benchmarking is very good if you have the luxury to have the inputs and the data for benchmarking. It's very good to do that. But however, always ask the why question when it comes to inputs. And of course, you can also express your opinion on why you think that the inputs and the assumption is optimistic or pessimistic, but always ask the why question. So that's what I do. I always try to find out the source of each input that goes into the model by looking at the project document, by talking to the people involved. And then finally, if I cannot find the answer, I will go and put it in the issue list that I'm preparing on the model and send it and have a constructive discussion based on those limited questions that I have identified. Okay, so that's a much more effective way of doing this kind of back and forth review of a financial model to avoid having unnecessary sessions on the review session, which I found in many cases it is the case. You do the work upfront of understanding the project, of reading the project document, so that when it comes to question and answer, you will have a very kind of constructive discussion on the points that are pending, and you could not really find the information from the project document. Okay, so that's it for me. I would close this topic now on the review. However, I always say that unfortunately, words don't teach. It's only experiences that teach. So I really recommend that you take any spreadsheet that you have, any financial model that you have in your files, and just go and check and see and do a mechanical check and input check, prepare an issue list for yourself, and just practice these things that we have discussed here in these 5 videos. And that's it for me. And I hope to see you in my next videos. I haven't yet decided which topics I will cover next. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Thank you and bye.